Okay, so we're going to be looking at this presentation, and this presentation is called Theme: How the Elements of the Story Affect the Theme. So what is theme? The theme is the controlling idea. It is a life lesson to be learned from the story. To find the theme of a story, we must determine the central purpose. So the most important information from that slide is that the theme is the life lesson to be learned from the story. When you think about theme asks us to identify what is the story really about. So if I were writing notes on this, I would say think. What is the story really about? That's how you're going to find the theme. A theme includes the topic, but it makes a comment on it. For example, if we think about the story that we read, the fish story about Ernie, a topic would be responsibility, but that topic is not the theme. A theme is a comment about a topic. It is never just one word. Repeat after me. The theme is never just one word. Okay? So if we're thinking about responsibility, a theme might be even a person who isn't responsible can learn to be responsible. That kind of fits with that story, the fish story, and how Ernie changes from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Okay? In order to discover the theme, you need to look at some things. You need to look at one, what a character learns and discovers, or the character's actions. Two, the conflict in the story, or the problem. Three, the series of events that take place, or the plot. All of these elements of a story affect the theme. So if I'm thinking about that, to find the theme, I have to think about what the characters learn, the conflict or problem, and the plot. What happens in the story from the beginning to the end. And when we're thinking about the plot, we're thinking about those plot elements, setting, you know, uh, conflict, rising action, climax, right? All of those things from the beginning of the story to the end of the story that develop the story and tell the story, the plot. So the big idea and the author's message, when you put those things together, that's how you get the theme. The big idea of the story together with the message the author wants you to learn, put those together and you have the theme. So how do we develop the theme in a story? Well, one of the things that develops the theme in a story is the characters. They contribute their feelings, goals, or personality to to the conflict and can alter another character's actions. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Where the character's personality and how they affect other characters. Does that sound familiar? What's it remind you of? Okay, the cat in the hat. And what were we looking at for the cat in the hat? It was a word that meant something else. Starts with an S. T. Steal. Yeah, we're looking at what the character says. The speech. The T is the thoughts. The E is effects on other characters. The A is the actions of the character, and the L is the way the character looks. Okay. So when you put those things together, you learn about the personality of the character. And when we looked at the pod, we saw how the steal for a character at the beginning of the story is often different than the way they are at the end of the story. And it's because that character changes. Okay. When we're talking about main characters, they often change in the story when they're faced with some kind of a conflict. So the experiences that character goes through determines the topics of your story. Thinking back to Ernie, responsibility is one of the topics because Ernie's story shows him times when it talks about how irresponsible he was at the beginning, and by the end, it talks about how responsible he was. These topics help to determine our theme. So, just to refresh, to review, The character still helps them as they learn the lesson in the story. Okay. For example, think about the story of Cinderella. Okay. What character traits did Cinderella portray? Well, she was kind, wasn't she? And she was gentle. Do you agree? One student also reminded me that to them, Cinderella was also weak. Why do you think a person would think Cinderella was weak? She couldn't do anything. She had to wait for somebody to come and kind of rescue her. So I could understand that. They saw Cinderella's actions as showing that she's weak because she doesn't stand up for herself. So those character traits, though, her kindness, her gentleness, are what kind of drew the prince to her, right? And he ends up coming and rescuing her from her horrible situation of, being treated basically like a slave by her stepmother and her evil stepsisters. Now, think about what would happen if Cinderella wasn't that type of person. What if Cinderella stood up to her stepsisters and her stepmother? What if she said to them, I'm not going to clean up after y'all anymore. I'm done. Walked out, got her own apartment, right? Would that have changed the story? Yeah. So if Cinderella, she probably wouldn't have left the prince. She probably would have got a job and made $1 million because she figured out that she could do it on her own and she didn't need a prince, right? But what I'm saying is, if Cinderella was not the type of person that she was, the story would have had a different theme. How do you think Princess Penelope from Young Ladies Don't Slay Dragons would have felt about Cinderella? Do you think that Princess Penelope would think that Cinderella was brave? She would be disappointed. Why would she be disappointed? Yeah, because she isn't a very strong character. She waited. That was her thing. The theme good things happen to good people is one theme, but the theme of good things happen to people who wait is another theme from that story, right? She didn't solve the problem of not being able to go to the ball. She waited for a fairy godmother to come and make her beautiful and get her there, right? She didn't go back and tell the prince, "Hey, I'm the one who left the slipper. I'm the girl you danced with all night." No, she waited for him to search everywhere else in the kingdom and find her. She's a person who waits for good things to happen to her. Do you see? Okay. So if she was a person, if she changed and she stopped being a person who waited for good things to happen to her, that would change the theme of the story in a big way. All right. So looking at the conflict determines the next event that's going to happen in the story. If there's no conflict, one, stories are really boring because there's nothing for the main character or the protagonist to fight against. Okay. So that conflict helps you to discover or changes the character in such a way that it changes the next events of the story. Think of Young Ladies Don't Slay Dragons. If the king had told Penelope, "Sure, go ahead and go slay the dragon," at the beginning, there would be no conflict, right? Would that change the story? Yeah. Okay, so now we're looking at the plot. The plot is the series of events that take place in the story. It's the flow of the story from the beginning to the middle to the end. It includes the conflict and some kind of resolution of that conflict from the beginning to the middle of the end of the story and the end of the story. So, how do the elements of the story affect the theme? If the conflict of a given story was to change, then the story would take a different path. Therefore, it would change the actions of the characters, which at the same time would change the plot. Since the theme is the main idea, topic, plus the message the author is trying to convey or to show you or explain to you, All the changes previously mentioned will directly affect the theme of that particular story. If the character changes in a drastic way, the theme of the story is going to change. If the plot of the story were to change in a drastic way, the theme of the story would change. So that means that the plot affects the theme. The actions, the speech, the thoughts of the character, and the way that they affect other characters affects how the lesson of the story is learned or the theme of the story is learned. So that is what kind of shows us what this lesson is designed for, to show us how the theme is affected by the characters in the plot. Okay? All right, so in the Avengers, what's the conflict in the Avengers? What would you say the conflict is? Let's talk about the last one. Don't spoil it for anybody. What's the conflict? In, okay, Thanos wants to take the Infinity Stones, right? And wipe out half of the universe. That is the conflict. Okay? Shh. Okay. So in the original Avengers, the conflict was that the Avengers or those heroes had to learn to work together. Do you agree? And in the one with the Infinity Stones, isn't that still a similar theme? They still have to learn how to work together, right? This shows that our topic of the movie, which is unity, which can lead to the theme, in unity there is strength. Can you imagine if all of the Avengers tried to fight Thanos's, like the people who come, if they tried to fight them individually by themselves? Think of that battle scene in Wakanda in the last Avengers movie. In that battle scene, what if they had tried to only fight one on one? They never would have gotten that far. Again, I'm not going to spoil the movie, so I'm going to stop right there. All right. So, if those Avengers had decided that they were going to fight Thanos one on one or fight the Thanos' goons one on one, it would have changed the outcome of that battle. It would have changed the outcome of the plot. Do you agree? Okay? Because they would have got wiped out pretty fast, don't you agree? All right. It was that coming together and working as a unit that helped them be successful in that part. All right? Okay. So I'm hoping that this helps you to better understand how elements of a story, like characters and plot, affect the theme of the story.